The anatomy of true tyranny. The darkest corners of history are often not bathed in the red glow of mass slaughter, but in a cold, calculating grey. We are conditioned to fear the madman, the brute who kills without reason. But the man we speak of today, Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, known to history as Caligula, was far more terrifying than a mere madman. He was an architect. He did not invent cruelty. Rome was already a cruel place, but Caligula took the existing machinery of absolute power, the laws, the legions, the very fear of the people, and retooled it, not for conquest, but for the systematic surgical destruction of the human soul. His goal was not to make you bleed. It was to make you witness your own degradation, to force you to smile through your grief, and to leave you with the sickening knowledge that you were complicit in your own ruin. The story of Caligula is the story of a system, a blueprint for terror that showed every tyrant who followed exactly how far the Roman state could be bent to purely psychological warfare. And the most chilling part, it was built by a child. To understand the emperor, you must first understand the orphan. The name Caligula, which means little boots, was not a name of fear, but of profound love. Imagine a great military camp in the northern frontier of Germania, roughly 14 AD. The air is cold, the ground is mud, and the men are the toughest legionaries in the known world. But running among them, in a perfect miniature replica of a legionary uniform, tiny iron armor, tiny red cloak, and the famous little leather boots, the Caligula, is a boy of 6, the son of the general they worshipped, Germanicus. Germanicus was the golden boy of Rome, brilliant, beloved, a military hero. His son was their mascot, their talisman of victory. This boy, Gaius, grew up in an atmosphere of unconditional adoration and limitless power, believing himself, quite literally, to be protected by the entire Roman army. Then the machine began its work. When Gaius was 7, his father died in Antioch, likely poisoned. The official story was fever. The reality was political assassination, orchestrated by rivals close to the Emperor Tiberius. Now, if you're still with me, take a moment to reflect on what we're learning about power. Give this video a like so this gruesome history can find more people. Gaius watched, paralyzed, as his family was dismantled. His mother, Agrippina, was exiled and starved. His eldest brother, Nero Caesar, was imprisoned and forced to commit suicide. His middle brother, Drusus, went mad in exile, trying to end his life by eating the stuffing of his mattress. The family of Rome's great hero was systematically, brutally purged. By the age of 19, Gaius was the sole survivor. And then came the summons. Emperor Tiberius required his presence on Capri. Capri, the name itself, is a whisper of luxury and depravity. Far from the eyes of Rome, Tiberius had turned the beautiful island into a house of horrors. Here, the aged tyrant indulged his paranoia and invented new cruelties born of boredom. And into this viper's nest walked young Gaius, knowing the man who summoned him had murdered his entire family. For 6 years, Gaius lived on Capri as a hostage. He couldn't mourn. He couldn't speak of the dead. He couldn't even look guilty. His face, his posture, his very breath had to be a perfect mask of obedience and cheer. The historian Suetonius described him during this period with a single chilling phrase: "There never was a better servant or a worse master." He was learning. He was watching Tiberius dissect senators, torture slaves, and weaponize fear. He was putting on the psychological armor that would save his life. The boy who was loved by everyone vanished. The man who survived was a perfected, unfeeling weapon. When Tiberius died in 37 AD, some say Gaius smothered him with a pillow. The little boots hostage was the most powerful man on earth. Rome rejoiced, believing they had regained the son of Germanicus. They had no idea they had crowned a survivor who had spent 6 years learning the black arts of tyranny from the master himself. Caligula's true reign lasted only 3 years and 10 months. But in that short span, he unveiled a 5-part machine of psychological torture. 1. The weaponization of grief. The divine Drusilla. Caligula had 3 sisters, but Drusilla was his constant companion. Ancient sources suggest their relationship was incestuous, a claim that, whether fact or propaganda, was certainly believed by Rome. Caligula used this perceived intimacy to blur the line between the personal and the political. When Drusilla died, Caligula didn't just mourn, he legislated mourning. He declared Drusilla a goddess, Diva Drusilla, the deification of a sister, an unprecedented act. Then he declared a period of state mourning, and the rules of that mourning were the first glimpse of the true horror. It was a capital crime to laugh. It was a capital crime to bathe. It was a capital crime to share a family dinner. Imagine that atmospheric terror. For weeks, the city was silent, suffocating under the weight of one man's forced sorrow. If your child told a joke at breakfast, did you discipline them or execute them? Every flicker of joy became a potential death sentence. He was making his inner world, his pain, his paranoia, his loss, the mandatory reality for 60 million people. He had discovered that he could criminalize happiness itself. 2. The profanity of aristocratic honor. The imperial brothel Caligula. Next aimed for the very foundation of Roman society, honor. In the Roman world, a nobleman's honor and the purity of his family's bloodline were more valuable than life. Caligula attacked this lineage directly. Historians allege that he established a brothel right inside the imperial palace, not for his personal use, but as a public business. It wasn't staffed by common courtesans. It was staffed by the sons and daughters of Rome's most noble families, the very people who sat in the Senate, commanded the legions, and governed provinces. He sent heralds into the streets to announce the prices: different rates for married women, special rates for virgins from senatorial families. But here is the most grotesque detail. He allegedly kept detailed ledgers, names, dates, transactions, the bureaucratic accounting of human degradation, signed and sealed by the emperor. Think of the Roman senator who traced his lineage back to the republic's founders. His entire identity was built on his name. Now his daughter's name was listed in an imperial ledger, advertised like cattle, and he could do nothing. To protest was to accept execution for his entire family. He had to pay his taxes, smile at the emperor, and know that his daughter's disgrace was written down officially by the state. Caligula wasn't just taking their bodies, he was erasing their legacy. 3. The deconstruction of the Roman male, the banquet of predation. This is the act that takes us back to our opening scene. It is the pinnacle of Caligula's system, where public witness and private humiliation intersect. You are a senator. You are at an imperial banquet. The wine is good, but it tastes like fear. Every senator is there with his wife. Caligula stands. Silence. He walks the tables, his eyes cold and evaluative. He stops at your table. He looks at your wife, examining her as if she were a piece of state property. He does not ask, he does not acknowledge you. He simply takes her hand and leads her away. You sit, you wait. An hour passes, like a century. You cannot move. You cannot speak. To weep is treason. To rise is suicide. You must pretend this is not happening. When he returns her, he doesn't simply disappear. He sits down right there next to you, and in front of everyone, your friends, your rivals, your colleagues. He begins to narrate, in graphic, clinical detail, exactly what just happened. He critiques her performance. He rates her against other senators' wives. He makes jokes. And you, the Roman husband, the patriarch, the lawmaker, the general, you have to smile. You have to laugh at his jokes. You have to nod and agree that this is perfectly normal. He is not violating your wife. He is dissolving you. He is taking your ability to protect your family, your dignity, your very manhood, and forcing you to celebrate its destruction. This is why the system worked. It made everyone a witness to everyone else's degradation. It left no space for honor, only survival. If you are finding this story as horrifying as I am, consider sharing this episode with someone who appreciates the truly gruesome corners of history. Your support keeps the gruesome historians going. 4. The attack on the primal bond. The grieving father Caligula realized there was one bond stronger than marital fidelity or aristocratic honor, the bond between a parent and a child. His new protocol was simple. When he executed a man's son, the father had to watch, up close, front row. But the horror didn't end with the death. The historian Suetonius records the precise detail that elevates this from cruelty to calculated torture. After the execution, the father was immediately summoned to the imperial palace for a banquet. The body of his son was still cooling. The father was sitting at the emperor's table, forced to eat food he couldn't taste, forced to make conversation he couldn't hear. And Caligula didn't speak. He simply watched the father, studying his face like a scientist conducting an experiment. He was checking to see if the father would cry, if he would show any sign of grief, any sign of the pain he was expected to feel. Because if he showed emotion, Caligula knew he hadn't fully broken him. He was taking a man's right to mourn his own child. He was making love itself a weapon, transforming the deepest human comfort, the bond between parent and child, into the source of the deepest human terror. The more you cared, the more vulnerable you were. Caligula grew supremely confident in his system. He believed fear would always win. He believed he had domesticated the entire aristocracy. But he made one crucial, fatal error. He aimed his systematic cruelty at the wrong kind of man. 5. The wrong man. Cassius Chaerea. The man's name was Cassius Chaerea, a senior officer in the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite personal bodyguards. Chaerea was a hardened soldier, a man trained for violence, a man who stood inches from Caligula every day with a sword on his hip. Chaerea had one physical characteristic that Caligula found endlessly amusing, a high-pitched, perhaps squeaky voice, and Caligula could not let it go. Every day, new jokes. Every military assembly, new mockery. The specific humiliation that broke the soldier was this. When it was Chaerea's turn to ask for the daily military password, a serious protocol done in front of all the guards, Caligula would sneeringly assign him words like Venus or Priapus, deliberately effeminate or sexual words designed to make the other soldiers smirk at Chaerea's expense. Day after day, week after week. For Caligula, it was throwaway humor. For Chaerea, it was a drop of poison accumulating in his blood. Caligula had successfully humiliated senators, men trained in politics and survival, but Chaerea was a soldier. He was trained to kill, and he had just been taught by his emperor that a life lived under this kind of daily petty degradation wasn't worth preserving. Caligula, the predator, had forgotten the most basic rule: never corner something that can kill you. The Reckoning, January 24th, 41 AD. Caligula is attending the theatre. He's in a jovial mood, full of his own invincibility. He decides to take a shortcut, a narrow, dimly lit underground corridor connecting the theatre to the palace. It is claustrophobic, with rough stone walls and the perfect killing ground. The conspirators, led by Chaerea, were waiting. Caligula approached. Chaerea stepped forward, as was his duty. He asked for the day's password. Caligula, with one final mocking sneer, gave the password. It was the last thing he ever said. Chaerea screamed, "Take this," and plunged his sword up beneath Caligula's ribs. The emperor stumbled. There was no escape in the narrow passage. The conspirators swarmed him. According to the sources, 30 stab wounds. 30 times the blade went in. 4 years of accumulated rage, humiliation, and terror released in 60 seconds of frenzied violence. The monster was dead. And that's when the true horror of the system emerged. The assassins didn't stop. They found Caligula's wife, Caesonia, and stabbed her to death. Then they found the nursery, Julia Drusilla, Caligula's 2 or 3-year-old daughter. A soldier picked her up, and while she cried for her mother, he swung her head first into a marble wall. They had to ensure that no part of the bloodline, no one who could grow up to seek vengeance, survived. They had to kill a toddler. This is what happens when the machine breaks. It devours everything, innocent and guilty alike. The system survives. For a few hours, the Senate debated restoring the Republic. They dreamed of the old ways. But while the senators talked, the Praetorian Guard, the army that Caligula had commanded, was looting the palace. One soldier heard a sound behind a curtain, drew it back, and found a trembling, middle-aged man with a limp and a stutter. It was Claudius, Caligula's uncle. The family embarrassment, everyone thought, was brain damaged. The guard looked at him and saw not a harmless fool, but a new opportunity. They carried Claudius on their shoulders to their camp and proclaimed him emperor. The army had spoken. The system survived. Caligula ruled for less than 4 years, a blip in the vast history of the Roman Empire. And yet 2,000 years later, we are still haunted by him. Why? Because Caligula proved something terrifyingly simple about power, that the entire machinery of a massive state, its laws, its economy, its military, can be turned into instruments of one man's personal paranoia and psychological sadism. He didn't work outside the system. He made the system his weapon. The ledgers in the imperial brothel, that was bureaucracy doing its job. The banquets where he violated senators' wives, that was imperial hospitality doing its job. Every atrocity was technically legal because he was the law, and when he was killed, the machine didn't die. It just found a new operator. Look at what came after. Nero, Domitian, Commodus. They all had Caligula's blueprint. They all understood the power of humiliation over mere violence. The system kept running, proving that the true monster was not the man, but the structure of absolute, unchecked power he refined. If this deep dive into historical darkness has resonated with you, whisper your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the Gruesome Historians for more forbidden stories told in the dark. There is one final fragment that lingers. After Claudius became emperor, he ordered most of Caligula's records, the ledgers, the correspondence, the documents, to be destroyed in a massive purge. The histories we have are written by men like Suetonius and Tacitus, relying on fragmented rumors and scarred memories. Which means what I've told you today, the divine sister, the aristocratic brothel, the shattered fathers, that is only what survived the purge. Imagine for a moment what was so disturbing, so utterly destructive to the human spirit, that even in an empire that fed people to lions, they decided it needed to be erased from history forever. The machine was destroyed, the records were burned, but the knowledge remains. Caligula ruled for 3 years, 9 months, and 8 days. He built a system that showed every future tyrant how to break human beings, systematically, psychologically, completely. And the blueprint, the architecture of absolute terror, is still out there,